Okay, all right. Well, hi everybody. Thank you for having me today. And this is it's a whole new world for all of us. So I'll do my best to give you some sense of what it's like to work in the film industry from one end to the other of it. And I was thinking about like, how do I introduce this notion? And I was thinking about how the film industry is really just an extension of, way back in time. If you go back to the earliest humans that were sitting around a fire, there has always been somebody who was telling stories. And I was thinking, how did we get from sitting around a fire telling stories all the way? I looked up what's the most expensive movie. Pirates of the Caribbean, $378 million it cost to make that movie. And in order to make something that big, you need a lot of people. Not just, I think when people think of the film industry, so often it's easy to see the face of it, right? Those of us who are on screen. But behind that, if you have a movie that costs $378 million to make, there's going to be a lot of people. And, if you ever sit, if we were in real life right now, I'd be like, well, we are in real life, but if we were all sitting here, I would say, like, who has stayed at the end of a movie and watched the credits? Not everybody stays. You can always, there's two people. You can always tell film people, because film people are the ones who stay and watch all the credits go by and like wait for their department. But what I'm going to show you is, so when you're going to work on set, you get something that's called a call sheet, and it looks like this. This one is it's called Bicyclist Chronicles, but it's actually from Descendants. I forget which one. And they sometimes will give it a fake name to sort of throw off paparazzi and people who might be looking around town. So you'll get one of these that's called a call sheet, and it will have, your cast and your crew and what scenes we're doing. And then this is what I really wanted to show you is this. This is the list of all the crew. And so everybody will have their names and their departments and what time they come. But that gives you an idea of just how many people are on set on a given day in any of these different departments. And then there's also post-production, which would be people who are dealing with the sound and the music. And do you guys know what Foley is? Does anybody know what that is? I don't know how anybody can answer this. I see shaking heads. Foley is, if somebody bites into something and it makes a crunchy sound, a lot of times they will have to make that sound in a sound booth. So that's what's called post-production. So after we have shot, so there's pre-production, in which the director and the producers in the various departments are getting a show ready. Then there's production, which is when we're shooting it. And then there's post-production. And it's why it takes so long for a movie or a TV show to come out, because there's all that work before, during, and after. And there are jobs that span, obviously, from the start to the finish of that. And so one of the things that I thought I could do is maybe ask you guys, what's a couple of skills that you feel like you have, or interests that you have? And maybe we'll take, say, 3 of those, and we'll try to figure out what department those would work with in the film industry. Does that seem like a kind of nifty way to do it?
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know how to get that answer from you guys. If I listen, can I hear any of them? I don't hear anybody. Does that matter?
Hi there.
Oh, there, I hear you.
We're not. Tristan's a little shy, so I'll speak for him.
No.
Okay.
Oh, you're not shy? Okay, then speak up.
I forgot engineering.
Engineering. Well,
Thing.
I'm sure you're going to the one where I'm like, gosh, where would we put you? Well, I think that would be, maybe if you're into engineering, you'd probably be more likely to be an engineer. There is something called an executive consultant on a film set. So for example, if we were doing a show where it was about a big engineering company, that whatever the things are that go with it, because we wouldn't necessarily have that expertise as a film producer, you would hire somebody, for example, an engineer, to come to our pre-production meetings and to be there on set to say, they wouldn't do it that way, or they would do it this way. Now, in terms of building and creating things, I would say that an applicable skill set on set would be, for example, a while ago on Magicians, which is a show that I have been on, well, we just unfortunately got canceled, but for 5 seasons. And in this last season, I was shadowing as a director, which is where I'm headed. That's a whole other skill set. They had a scene where Magana was supposed to do a magic spell and put her hand up like this, and this book flew into her hand. And in order to make that happen, they had to rig up this machine and this sort of a series of wires that would go, that they then later took out in CGI, which is, you guys know what CGI is, right? Computer generated imaging, or VFX, we would call it, visual effects. So they could erase those those wires out of there, but they had to come up with the machine that would allow her to put out her hand like this, saying her little spell, and that book flew into her hand. Probably the same thing that you guys would have all seen in something like Harry Potter. So there's a certain degree of engineering that has to come for also. There's another one in Magicians where I do a certain spell like this and all these things rise up in the air. And again, sometimes it's very simple where they're like doing it with a fishing rod. And sometimes, you know, depending on how complicated it is, they have to build a machine that will make that work. So that would be an example perhaps of how you could use that sort of skill set in film. Another one I was thinking of that maybe is applicable to your age level is like video games. How many of you guys play video games? Probably lots, right? Me, not so much. This would probably be evident if you ever sat down with me and played a video game. Although I have played Wii, you know, I can handle Wii bowling and stuff. I don't think that's quite the same. But I was thinking about, I was on a set a little while ago on a show that I just shot, and drones is this whole new technology that has become really important in the film industry, where before, if you would see a shot from way high up of a car driving down a mountain road, oh, I love your window. She's got this beautiful, colorful window. You used to have to get a helicopter to make that happen. And now with drone technology, now they need all these people who have the skill set of, you know, the kids that were sitting around in their living rooms playing whatever your games are nowadays, like your Xbox, and have this sort of hand-eye coordination. Those are the people who are now grown up and flying drones with cameras on them to get all these really incredible shots that you see in film and television now. So again, like taking a skill set that you wouldn't imagine as a kid playing video games, that someday as a grown-up, you could be the one who's flying these. And it was a huge drone with this very expensive, I mean, a camera in the film industry is probably $100,000 to be able to, you know, to trust somebody with the skill set to fly one of those and get these shots. So just another example of a skill set that you might not expect that has real application within the film industry. Do you guys want to ask a question now for the next, you know, what thing we can talk about? Do you want to know more about departments? How would you like to talk about the next piece? Julia, do you have a thought?
All of this is so fascinating. I'm very fascinated by what goes on behind the scenes of what you see when you're at home, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I guess I'm just wondering from your experience, like when you go back and you watch things that you have, shows or movies that you've been in, like, does it feel like a completely different experience watching it than when you were actually filming it? Because it must be so different, the things that are switched around and edited. And does it feel like when you watch it for yourself, does it feel like you're almost watching it and you're surprised by what you're seeing?
Sometimes it really depends on the role. It depends on how kind of deep inside it I am. You know, the difference between playing a fairy on Once Upon a Time and, for example, playing a heroin addict on a show many years ago, where I felt almost like that character played itself, like it just took me over. And so watching it after was interesting because it wasn't necessarily specific choices I'd made. I'd done my work and my homework, but that girl just kind of came out. And so watching that post facto was interesting, versus, you know, Once Upon a Time, I don't know how many of you guys have seen that, but you've all seen stuff where people have done green screen. There's a lot of wonderful stuff on the web of the Harry Potter kids, for example, where they'll show the real, what you've seen in the theater right up against what they've done on green screen. And so there are many times when I have been on set as the Blue Fairy. So they made me very small through VFX so that I would be this big beside a person. And in reality, I was on a giant sound stage with a huge, big green screen behind me, hanging up in the air, courtesy of our stunt team. There's another skill set that it's not just about the people that get punched and hit and fall down. There's some people called riggers that were extremely important for people like me who had to do stunt work up on these. They're called pick lines, where they put a harness on you and they attach it to these wires and ship you up into the air. And these people that are running how the wires go up and down and how they move through the studio and are in charge also of my safety, or anybody else who's up in these rigs. So a lot of times, you know, I would be up there by myself, and because it's green screen, they often wouldn't even have the other actors there. So I would be talking to, like, they would put a water bottle down here, put a little X on it with tape and say, okay, that's Prince Charming. And here's what's called a C-stand that they use for various pieces of lighting, where they'll put, say a bounce, or they'll, if they wanted to shadow me, they would put it in front of the light so that this part of my face would be dark. They go up on a C-stand and they would put like a piece of tape on that. They would say, okay, so that's Snow White. And so in reality, I was up here not talking to a real person. And then when you would watch it afterwards, you would be in, sometimes I would be in the castle, and there would be this whole castle behind me, and then when they reverse, they've shot those people on their piece of green screen, and none of us were together. And then via the magic of editing, there we all are. So to see those ones, certainly once the world comes to life, that's always interesting, especially when you've been by yourself talking to a water bottle.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess my other question too is, when you spend so much time embodying these characteristics of all of these different people that you're playing, how do you find a way to, come back to yourself and ground yourself back to you, the actual person that you are, after so much time of becoming somebody else for a role?
Mm-hmm. I would say that's different depending, again, on the kind of character that I'm playing. I have many characters that I play that are quite light, including, say, Belle in Descendants. So those ones are ones that you can kind of take off at the end of the day. You take off your big, fancy, itchy, uncomfortable dress, and you're like, put on your sweats and back to normal. Versus, I've played some very troubled people. I did a horror movie a couple of years ago where this mother was really just on a psychological downturn that took her to some very dark places. And I found that one really difficult to let go of once I got home, because to some degree, we all know our own faces. And sometimes when you go into work and they change what you look like, even things that sound so silly, like having my own eyebrows back again versus that woman's eyebrows. And the way that you haven't been yourself for a while, trying to shake that off, it really depends on the role. And certainly there are some that if I'm working, I can't be. There's a thing called craft services when you're on set, and it's depending on how big the budget is. On some of the shows, of course, that I've been fortunate enough to be on, it's like a whole trailer filled with food. It's a very dangerous place. And so, you go there, and it's kind of like the water cooler of the film industry, where you go and you get your little snacks and your coffee and you chat with people from all the different departments. And there are certain shows in which I just can't do that. I have to be off on my own. I'm in my trailer. I have headphones on. Because I have very emotional work to do. So I cannot be in sort of those two places at once. And it just really depends on the role that you're playing.
Okay. Thank you.
Any more questions? Should I maybe try to give you, I did have a thought about like an overview of some, like all of the different departments that I can kind of give you a sense of, unless you guys have more specific questions about the film industry and different shows that I've been on. And
looks like Lex might have a question.
Pardon me?
Lex, I saw your hand up. Did you have a question too?
Yes, I did. What's your favorite role?
My favorite role. That answer is different depending on which thing I'm speaking about, because there are roles that really stir my heart that maybe nobody will really have seen. There's a Canadian show that I did many years ago. I forget that you guys are Canadians, though. It was called Da Vinci's Inquest, and that was the one where I played a heroin addict. Do you remember that one? Down on the downtown east side, and a one that I really felt like I sort of channeled. That remains a favorite of mine because it was such an amazing experience as an actor, but not that many people necessarily saw it, versus, say, Once Upon a Time, which was a fun role, and has given me the opportunity to travel around the world and have, fans and whatever those things might be, but wasn't necessarily a role that like stirred my heart the same as this little indie film I did in Calgary a year or so ago with this woman on this terrible psychological journey that for me as an actor was just amazing. And it's a little teeny $300,000 film that who knows how many people will see. But for me as an actor was like just meaty and delicious and dark and full of depth and backstory and script analysis and the kind of stuff that I really love as an actor. So there are the things that lots of people see, which is wonderful, like A Series of Unfortunate Events is a huge show. But not necessarily the one
I
that
love
as an
that
actor
show.
floats your boat, you know? I mean, I really did love that one. Don't get me wrong, but you get what I'm trying to say. Like something that's more complicated versus something that is simpler, or you have a smaller role in, or whatever. So there's the two sides of that equation. I did really, really love Bates Motel, which I'm assuming you have not seen. And I hope you haven't seen, because it's a little bit older, that one. But when you're old enough to watch Bates Motel, that one, again, that was the kind of role that was very complicated to play. And it was a very fine line of how to play it. And that's the kind of stuff I like. I really love complicated characters. I consider myself a character actress. So those are the ones that I really like the most. Hello, hi. I saw your hand.
Trying to read the names here.
What would you be if you couldn't be an actress?
What would I be if I couldn't be an actress? Well,
Writer or director?
say that again, sorry?
Would you be a writer or a director?
I would be a director. I mean, I would think I would be a writer too. I've always been a writer. And for the last couple of years, I have really been studying to become a director. I made my own film, and there's something that's called shadowing. And I was fortunate enough that on Magicians, they were really open to having other people learn other positions. And so I would come and hang out behind the monitors and shadow all from pre-production, and go to all the meetings and go out to locations and sit in on the meetings where they were talking about the tone and how they were going to cast this and what props they were going to use, and then spent the week on set watching how it came to fruition. So for me, I'm moving into directing, and that's what I would say. Outside of that, the other things I think I would have been if I could have been, like a wildlife photographer. I think that would be really interesting. And another one that I think a lot about is I would have loved to have been a spy, like a double agent. I think all of the skill set that I have as an actress kind of would be relevant to being a spy. I used to read a lot of spy thrillers, about 20 years ago, and I was really into that. The fact that you could be, I was living in Paris, that you could be walking over the Pont Neuf, and there was always scenes about these spies meeting on the Pont Neuf. And I thought, like, how many times was I walking by and there was actual real spies meeting on that bridge, So how's that for an answer?
I have a question about what you think the future of the industry is. Like, all these kids are going to be growing up, and what do you think is the most exciting thing that's happening in your industry?
I think that one of the most exciting things that's happening in the industry right now, particularly for me as I'm moving towards directing, like I'm sitting in front of, I have my little light kit here. I have this it's called a gimbal that I have my phone on. You see them, like YouTubers use them, walking down the street, and they can hold their own. And my iPhone that shoots in 4K, which is how I shot my actual film and how most TV and film are shooting right now. And I got lenses from a company called Moment. So I have like a macro lens, and I have a telephoto lens, and whichever other things. And so I have the mechanisms by which to make my own films, which is what I was about to go and make a couple more when this whole thing happened. And, unless I'm going to put my kids in my messy house it's not going to be happening. But what I'm really pointing to is that the instrument of filmmaking is now in the hands of every man and woman out there, that if we want to, we can. And you can go out and make a film for $200 or $50. I was the director of the show that I just did. His very first film, which won the prize at Cannes, cost $50. So it doesn't necessarily have to be some huge budget thing. And now the means are available to all of us at all levels. It used to be, I think, a very closed circuit. And even I've been in this business for more than 20 years. When I was coming up, you never saw women in positions, for example, like a producer. You never saw a female director. It was probably 10 years before I'd seen more than one female director. And that director was quite a famous actress. And she was guest starring on the show that I was doing at that time. And so that was sort of an exception. And so now that there's a Gina Davis Institute for Gender Studies in the Media. They have something called, they say, if she can see it, she can be it. And I feel like now you can see that you can be a director. And then not just for this about women, but about young people in general. You can see that it's possible to do these things. And so that's how I would answer that. I think that the means are available to all of us now. Anybody else? I only see 4 of you, so I'm afraid to touch it because I don't want to lose everybody. Hi, I see you with the telescope in the background. Is that what that is?
So I personally am like a big fan of Once Upon a Time and Bates Motel. I've watched both multiple times. But how much of it is just like CGI and like how much of it is like real life props? Like how much of like the set is actually built?
And Once Upon a Time, let me try to think of a particular. So do you remember the episode with Tinkerbell where I was in the big giant flower? Do you remember that one?
Yeah, yeah.
So the big giant flower in that case was actually real. So here I was dressed up as a fairy standing in this giant flower, and they had a light that I was sort of standing on top of that was really hot actually. And then everything around us was just green screen. There was at the very end of Once Upon a Time, there's a whole thing with the heart where I'm holding some heart. It appears in my hand, and Tiger Lily, the other fairy, is after it, and we're in. We've been held captive. I can't remember where exactly we were, but that again was just green screen. But in the midst of it, there is a real armoire kind of cabinet thing with all of the real actual props in it. You know, my wand is real. That heart that I was holding beating lit up in my hand was real. Generally speaking, if you're holding it in your hands, it will be what's called practical, which means it is a real thing. But sometimes, and then if it's not, it will be CGI'd. Like, oh gosh, what else can I think of that would go along with that? My wings, for example, those were always CGI'd. And it just sort of depends on what that thing is and whether or not they can, you know, when we go back to the question about engineering, whether or not it was something that they could hook up to be real. There was the big leather-bound books at the end of Once Upon a Time, and I don't remember if you've seen it, they had everybody's name on the side. There was a Snow White one and a Blue Fairy one, and the Blue Fairy's book was meant to flip itself open and the pages to rustle, and they had worked out these kind of fake books like that just had a couple pages, and then they were gonna, you know, do I think a CGI of it, and in the end they ended up using a practical book, a real book of it, and they took a big fan and blew the pages open instead, if I remember correctly. You know, so does that sort of answer your question?
Yeah.
In terms of Bates Motel, which is again a little bit above the pay grade of some of the people who are going to be watching this, but there was actual prosthetics in that for you know, how do I talk about this? The injury that she had, that was not CGI'd to look like that. That was a whole actual prosthetic piece that we spent quite a bit of time having made and getting put on, and having the edges done by the special effects makeup team. There's another wonderful department like that. So many people that might say, oh, I love to do makeup. Well, you can take that one step further and be the one who does the elf ears in The Hobbit, or makes people's, you know, if you see a movie like The Hours with Nicole Kidman where they gave her Virginia Woolf's nose, or if there's injuries, you know, those obviously we're not going to be injuring real people. So any of those have to be made by special effects teams. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Good.
What was the
Any other
first
hands?
movie you were in?
Is that a question?
Yeah.
I can't hear. Okay, you tell me. Who is it? Let me see if I can scroll up and see. Oh, no, that doesn't look like it.
He said, what was the first movie you were in?
The first movie I was in, I think, was called Double Jeopardy with Ashley Judd. I had one little teeny scene. And the first TV show I was ever in was a show called Two. And then funnily enough, maybe 2 years later, I was in a show called Three. And I was in a show called The Net. And then I did a movie called The Net 2.0, and then also a show called Jake 2.0.
I saw Jake 2.0.
You saw that one?
Yeah.
I loved that show, and I loved the people on it. That's one of the great things
What
about
was
the
it
film
called?
industry.
Jake
It was
2.0.
called Jake 2.0. It was really kind of ahead of its time. It was about a guy working for the NSA, like a government agency, and there's an explosion in a lab that has been working on these teeny tiny little robots called nanobots. And when it cuts him, the nanobots get inside of him and then make him kind of like a superhuman. He has superhuman strength, and he can see better, and he can run faster. And that was Chris Gorham, who you guys might know from Ugly Betty, and he was in Insatiable and so many things. He's always working. So the wonderful and lovely Chris Gorham.
Did you overcome any fears?
I think when you first start, I can remember on one of my first days on set, because you don't know what it's like when you get there. You don't know what you're supposed to do, really. You have a general idea. I had been studying to be an actor, but I hadn't had any days on set. And so you know, there's tape on the floor where you have to stand, because the director of photography, who is in charge of how everything is lit and how we look, you have to stand in that certain spot to be able to kind of hit your light. So the difference between how you're lit like this and how you're lit when you're, you know, dead on to your lights, you know, your eye line, things like if you're looking down like this, well, I can't see your eyeballs, but so then I have to adjust my eye line to be up so that you can see my eyeballs, you know, all those things that you didn't even realize that you didn't know until you get on set. So certainly I think those early moments in your first times on set are like, and I even felt like that as a director when I made my film, when I was really prepared and I had worked really hard on it, and I wrote it and I picked everything that was in it, and I knew what I was doing, and I'd been doing, you know, this business for 20 years. And still, when I went to stand on set my first day as a director, I felt a little like, you know, I remember even at first I got my AD to call action because I was so focused on trying to keep track of everything and see what was on the monitors. And it took me a little bit of time to kind of shake off the nerves of that early morning, that first day. And I think it's like any profession where when you're new, you're nervous, right? Even today, like doing this, I dreamt about this all night because I thought, you know, you want to do a good job and you want to make it interesting. And I didn't know how many people would be there, and I didn't know if my equipment would work. And I think it's normal to have nerves no matter what it is that you're doing.
I have a question.
Okay.
How much preparation do you need before you can start your first act?
Your first act of what? Of being, you have to, you know, of writing something?
No, your first filmed act.
Well, it depends on how big your production is. You know, if you're going to make a little, although I will tell you that like my 6-minute short film took probably 2 months of working in pre-production to bring it all together. Granted, when you're professionally doing a film, you have a team that's all working together, that all has their own departments that they're in charge of, and you have a much shorter schedule, but you're doing so much more at a time because you're only doing that, which is a bit different. But you know, there's everything from, if you're just shooting it at home, you need to know what your story is. You need to know who your people are, where they're going to be doing their acting, you know, where the story takes place, and you need to sort of settle all that. If you're shooting it at your house, well, you just need your house. But maybe you're shooting it at a piece at the playground, well, you got to make sure that you have permission to go down to the playground and shoot there, and you maybe need permission from your friends' parents that they're allowed to be in your film. And imagine that just on a bigger scale when you do an actual production, right? So if you want to start off with at home, the most important thing is always going to be your story, and then you kind of build the details out from there. When it comes to doing even a professional short film, you need things like I had to feed my crew. I ended up with 35 people working on my film, and I had to make sure that they had snacks throughout the day, that they had water to drink, that they had lunch and dinner. I had to work out the locations where I was shooting. I was shooting in a mansion. I had to make sure everybody knew how to get to where that was. I had to have, we had to have a crew come in and make sure that the walls were protected and the floors were protected. And we had to get insurance, and then we had to rent the equipment, and how was the equipment going to get there, and who was going to unload it. And, you know, so there's just details upon details upon details. And the bigger the production is, the more details there are. But in terms of if you want to just start and make a little film, make a 2-minute film first and see what it takes to make that. And then make your 5-minute film, then make your 10-minute film. And you'll see how the details will expand outward from there. But as long as you have a story, you could start today, right? And if you've got an iPhone, you got an iPod, look at, you're halfway there, right?
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody else have any more questions? maybe I could just sort of summarize as I'm looking at my crew list here and just maybe just give you another little, like, let's see how things fit. If you like to build stuff, if you're handy and you like to, you built yourself a birdhouse and you know how to make a table and you're thinking, I like to do that. That's the construction department. A lot of times when you see, for example, a hospital set, that's not filmed in a hospital. They have made a room on a soundstage and filled it up with the things of a hospital set. And then that would bring me to, say, set deck. Say you love to decorate. Say that's what interests you. You love to watch those like home and garden shows. Well, then maybe set deck is the place for you. They're the people who pick the bed and they make the room look like the room that we're imagining. They make it look like a hospital room, or they make the teenager's bedroom with all the cool teenager stuff in it. And then there's the props department who would be in charge of the things that you're holding in your hand. That's props, although funnily enough, I was going to actually talk about this. Things like rings are props, not wardrobe. But a hat is wardrobe, but a purse is props. Just weird things about different departments. But those are all places, like if you love clothes, then maybe the wardrobe department is for you. If you wanted to be a fashion designer, that's an area of the film industry that would work for you. And there's even, like, I think one of the most important pieces of the film industry are locations. The people who go out and find all these really interesting places where we shoot and coordinate how we work within that location. Are we allowed to use this door, but we're not allowed to use this door? And, stopping traffic on a street when we have to have not just random people driving by and doing this out their window as we're trying to shoot. So there's just a team that does all pieces of things that you wouldn't even imagine. The people who are good with numbers, we all need the accounting department. They're the ones who work with the budget of how much money we have to make whatever we have and make sure that we don't go over and make sure that everybody gets paid and that there's money to buy the food that's on our craft services table. So there are just like innumerable jobs within the industry. And the one thing, one last thing that I did want to say, I was thinking about sort of pros and cons of the film industry. And I do think it's worth talking about, as you might be hearing a lot now about something called the gig economy. And I have to admit, I didn't even really consider that I was part of that until this coronavirus happened and everybody's talking about the gig economy. And I realized it's true, we are. The film industry is cyclical, and it's not like a job where if you're a teacher and I'm going to be a teacher and I have my class and I have my school that I'm a part of, or, I'm an accountant and I work at this accounting firm and I will be here throughout much of my career. In the film industry, you do a movie, sometimes they only last 3 weeks and then you're out of work again. And so I would definitely say it requires a certain hardiness of heart to be in the film industry because it's never sure. If you're lucky enough to get on a crew of a show that's on for 5 years or 8 seasons or 10 seasons, then great. By and large, those crews will keep coming back and you have kind of a regular, solid job. But particularly as actors, we are constantly in and out of work. And I suppose in some ways that makes this easier to bear this time now because we're used to it to some degree. But it's not for the faint-hearted in that respect. If you really value security, then it might not be the industry for you. You might give your parents a heart attack too if you say you want to be in the film industry. But what is really wonderful about it is that you're constantly meeting new and interesting people, particularly if you branch out from your own department and go and check out other departments. And it's never the same day twice, except perhaps on like really, really big budget movies that are shooting one scene, sometimes for days to make one scene based on the logistics and how big it is and how many people are in it. And so, there are pros and cons for sure. I love he's got like the gamer headset on.
Yes, they all have their unique videos set up.
Yeah.
Whatever works.
Indeed.
Are you talking about me?
Is that somebody asking a question? Sorry?
Are you talking about me with the headset?
Who are you talking about?
Me?
All of your background.
Are you talking about me?
Does anybody else have any questions for Keegan while we have her online? I would like to know, geographically, where's the most exciting place or your favorite place you've ever got to work?
I got to work in Turkey. I did a film there probably 15 years ago, I guess. And so I got to go and stay in Istanbul for about a month. I guess I was there maybe. And that was the first time that I had been to a country like that. And you could hear in the morning, you know, the imams would be singing from the parapets. And it's such an ancient city to think of standing on the shores of the Bosphorus and knowing the civilizations that had been there so long before. And then to go and shoot this crazy film about, you know, the internet kind of spying on you and ruining your life. And I still remember the very first day that I was actually shooting. So you get there a little bit in advance to kind of get your feet under you with jet lag and everything. And my first scene was in one of the mosques. I feel like it was Suleimani Mosque, but I can't remember which one it was. And I was like, getting away, and they lead me in. And the minute I walked into set, which was in the actual mosque, it just took my breath away. And I sort of honestly burst into tears. I could not comprehend how 3,000 years ago they could have built this enormous, beautiful, intricate, amazing structure. And so that has always stood out for me as really one of the most interesting places I've ever gotten to shoot.
Amazing.
Yeah. We're pretty lucky, you know. It can be glamorous. It's great when it's great, and it's difficult when it's difficult. But yeah, you certainly have some good stories. Anybody else have a question about a show that they've seen that they want to ask a question about? I think it's legal now. We can, we've done our lesson.
What was your favorite part in Series of Unfortunate Events that you had?
That was just such an incredible show. I've been on big shows, but this show had a scope unlike anything. They built a whole side of a mountain with an actual pond at the top.
Oh yeah, that one. I love that show.
It was amazing. And like I said, if you become used to it. So, you know, you walk on a set and you're like, oh, there's a castle or whatever it is. And to see the whole mountainside that they had built was wild to me. And I had fun on that one because I had my little troop of, what were they called? Snow Scouts, but I called them my snow brats. And so we joked around a lot about the snow brats. And in fact, I coach one of the kids, and every time I see him, I say, my snow brat.
One of my favorite parts was probably seeing the stone that they marked in the first episode again in like the third season. Like with the big giant mechanical octopus, like in the first season when they were waiting for the guy to come and pick them up and bring them to Count Olaf's house. Yeah. They chucked a stone into the water, but they had marked it with an X on it. You see that again later in the show in the third season.
And I've seen all of it, and I still don't remember that.
I've seen it twice.
Well, see there, that's cheating. You've seen it twice, so you're better informed than me. Well, I can tell you though, do you remember in the episodes that I was in, so they were like episode 3, 4, I think, how there was that whole cave and all the kids, the Snow Scouts were all in that cave with Carmelita.
Oh, yeah.
They built that whole cave with, I think it had 3 sides to it. There was a whole forest in behind it, all with actual trees. So this gentleman, young man that asked before about things that were practical versus CGI, a lot of those things on a Series of Unfortunate Events that you would expect would have been CGI were actually really there on the soundstage. Like a whole forest of these skinny little birch trees and fake snow, and they have machines that will put snow into the air. It was an astonishing set.
Who is your favorite other character than you in Series of Unfortunate Events?
Count Olaf. That show was particular. Like, there were so many great characters, and loved the woman, her with the crazy outfits. That was his girlfriend. What was her name?
Her name was Esme.
Esme, yes.
Right. Yes, she had the best outfits. I have to say, I was very disappointed when I got my outfit for the Series of Unfortunate Events, because I was hoping I was going to be some glamorous thing, and then I looked like I was wearing lederhosen. It was not super glamorous.
Sunny is probably one of my favorite characters.
She's pretty cute, though.
Yeah. But the episode that confused me the most, the first time I watched it, was when at the exact same time, the 3 twins, one of them was hiding.
The 3 twins?
The 3 twin brothers at the hotel.
Oh, you've lost me. It's been so long since I watched it. I'm sorry I can't play along.
Wait,
I won't remember. I'm so sorry.
Wait, somebody else can talk. I'm trying to check for something.
You're gonna find it, okay? Does anybody else want to ask? I keep wanting to see more faces, but I don't know how to do it. No, that's just me. Okay. What does that say? Rowan. Who's Rowan?
Rowan Innes, yeah.
Does anybody else have a question in the meantime? Not so much?
I think it's fabulous that you, I think it's fabulous how much goes on behind the scenes and how many jobs there are. I think we forget about that.
Like how, Kit was, like how Kit was taking them to the hotel. Oh, you're talking about the slippery slope.
Right. That's the ones I was in, Slippery Slope, yes.
Yeah.
It's been so long since I saw it. I'm so sorry. I really can't remember.
Yeah. It's fine.
I did. You remember that big backpack I had on, though, that I was like, you know, sort of struggling to get up the mountain? Again, the practical thing that you were asking before, that whole thing weighed like 4 pounds.
So of course we're all stuck inside right now, but before this or currently, are you working on any projects?
I had just finished filming out in the interior BC. I don't know if I'm allowed to say what it was or not. I'm sure it probably won't be so terrible if I say. I was in the Twilight Zone, the newest one that Jordan Peele is doing. And what had I done before that? I can't even think.
Larry, your waiter. I forgot about him. Larry, your waiter.
Okay. That was a long time ago that I shot that even. I remember so little of that one. But yes, so Twilight Zone is what I was working on. And then Magicians was before that. So the last couple of episodes that are coming up of Magicians, I don't know if any of you guys have seen that. I don't know if that's above your pay grade also. I don't know. And then mostly right now I'm working on my own. I have 2 little micro shorts that I wanted to shoot that I won't be able to shoot now. And I have a film that I'll be directing, hopefully, if, you know, depending on everything that happens in the world right now, I'll be directing a feature film later this year. Fingers crossed for us all to go back to life as soon as possible, as soon as it's safe. So cool. I'm going to keep saying that I'll be directing that film before the end of the year, but you know, well, obviously it's a wait and see for everybody in every way.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm happy to do it again sometime if you guys, I know sometimes when you're doing these and then you can't think of a question and then afterwards you think of 20 questions.
Another question.
Who has, okay, I can't see you, but I'm listening.
What's the biggest difference for you in filming a TV show and filming a movie?
The timeline is very different. A TV show, generally speaking, will shoot for 8 working days. So, you know, Monday to Friday, and then say Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of the week after that. And now that doesn't include prep, although as an actor, the only prep time you do is usually we'll have a read through around the table where all the actors and producers and the writers will come together in real life or virtually and read the script so that they can check that out. And then you have 8 days of shooting. And you're not usually in every day unless you're what's called number 1. So when you have your cast list, see here, number 1, whoever that is, in this case it was Mal, so Dove Cameron, they're usually in pretty much every day because they have the most stuff. So that shoots pretty quickly, and how much you are shooting in a day is another thing I can show you. Your page count, how much, that's what these are. This will tell you how many eighths of a page that any given piece of a scene is, and then at the end of the day you'll have shot X amount. And on a feature film, they usually have a much longer, elongated schedule. They have much bigger setups. They tend to have more money. It depends on if it's an indie film or not. I mean, in the indie film I did, we had a 13-person crew, and we shot for 18 days, where you have a film like, The Hobbit that will shoot for 8 months. And so I think that's the biggest difference, is that film and TV is very fast. Go, go, go. You've got 8 days. You've only got, depending on what, again, on the budget, we tend to shoot what's called a camera day. So other people are in beforehand. Wardrobe is in earlier, hair and makeup. I'm usually in hair and makeup for at least 2 hours before I even step onto a set in real clothes. So all of those people are there early. And then there's something called crew call, which would be when the rest of the crew is meant to arrive for work. And they feed us on set. They feed us breakfast. They feed us lunch. So everybody sort of lines up at the truck and gets your breakfast. And then crew call is, here, this one's 11:30. So that means everybody gets there at 11:30. And we shoot what's called called a camera day. And most, TV shows will shoot, say, a 14-hour camera day. So from the time when everybody else gets there, when crew call is, you'll shoot 14 hours past that. And so you only, and if you have less budget, there are many shows that have to stop at 12 hours, because after 12 hours, you get involved in overtime and it becomes very, very costly and sort of balloons out. But the days are shorter, and the less money you have, the shorter the days are, the less what's called a setup, which would be the angles. Like next time you're watching a show, look at the different shots that they have. This would be what's called a medium. And then you can have a close-up. And then you can have the one where you show the whole room and the 2 people there. Those are called setups. Every time we have to move the cameras and move the lights, they cost time, which equals money. And so the less money you have, the less time you have, the more condensed your days will be. Whereas a lot of times, particularly big budget films, they can shoot one scene for 3 days and never move a camera, because they're going to cover it. Well, no, they'll move the camera. They're going to cover it in 15 different angles, from above and from over here, and a big wide and the fish lens, and whichever those things might be. And so they have the luxury of money, which gives you the luxury of time. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
She's like, yes. Oh, good. I'm so glad.
I found what I was looking for, like Dewey Denouement, and then like Frank and Ernest as well, the 3 twins.
Oh, okay. 3 twins.
Frank, like I can share my screen.
Oh, that's
to
okay.
to see if that can boost your memory.
Show me some technology here. I don't even know how to see all the kids in this. It must be that only 3 people have their cameras on. Is that why?
Yes.
No, there's not just 3 people. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8. I see everybody.
I don't know why. I don't know, but I'm afraid to mess around with it too much, because then maybe I'll lose everybody. So, okay.
But
next time we'll have it figured out so I can see everybody.
Well, I got one more question.
Okay.
So have you ever had the experience, like if you ever have watched a movie and saw an actor that you really looked up to, that may have brought you into the industry? Have you ever had done a scene with an actor that you always were a big fan of and got excited about?
Yeah, I remember working with Michael Keaton, who was the original Batman. I mean, that was pretty cool. I remember getting on set, and I had grown up, watching him in Beetlejuice. These are going to be kind of dated references for a lot of you, but, when he was a big star as I was growing up, and again, the original Batman, and showing up on set and just being like, it's Mr. Mom, which again will mean nothing to probably even you, Julia. So there are opportunities for that. It's a strange world, because by and large, you're yeah, we're all in the same business. We're all the same. We get this. I do fan conventions around the world. I've been lucky enough to do that mostly because of Once Upon a Time. And yes, I get to meet people sometimes. And I will say for example, at this last one that I just did in Brussels, unfortunately, I didn't get the opportunity to work with him as an actor, but we were getting ready in the morning to go to the convention, and those of us at the same hotel with the same bookers and whatever, we were gathering together. And I turned around and Anthony Daniels was standing in front of me, who is C-3PO. And, you know, the original Star Wars was when I was probably you guys' age. And I've been watching him my whole life. And I went to shake his hand and I got like the verklempt cry talk. I was like, it's a pleasure to meet you. I was like, what happened? It was really embarrassing because, you know, as an actor, you don't do that. But I just had this very natural moment in meeting him where I realized, and it was also a really interesting sort of light bulb moment in terms of what he meant to me, having watched him since I grew up. It made me understand the fans' reactions a lot of times when I meet them, or certainly people vastly more famous than I am. We have a special place in this world and in this culture because people invite us into their living rooms, onto their screens in front of their faces. We're in intimate spaces with people, even though we're not there. And I think that's why it's interesting for us when all of us, when we meet somebody that we look up to or that we're excited about their work, and you get to see them and be able to tell them that their work has moved us, affected us. You know, when I was on Lemony Snicket, a series of unfortunate events there, oh my gosh, why is his name Patrick Warburton, who for me was Putty from Seinfeld. It was such a pleasure for me to meet him and shake his hand and say, you know, it was so great. And here he was dressed the same as me in that ridiculous Snow Scouts outfit, which to my eternal pleasure to see him dressed like that was so funny. And I kicked myself that I didn't get a picture of us standing together. But again, when you talk about how sets move very quickly, it was one of those instances where they brought him in at the end of my scene for him to do his scene, which nobody else was in because he's the narrator. And it just wasn't possible. They were like, okay, we gotta go. They're moving the cameras. Let's go. We're done the thing. And I wasn't able to go over and interrupt that process to be like, hey, you know. But yeah, I think even those of us in the industry, we feel that too sometimes when we show up on set. I think that's a great question.
I think we're running out of time, but I just want to make sure everyone has their questions out. I think everyone might be a little bit maybe starstruck. But this has been so cool and so informative, and yeah, I love what you shared with us today.
I'm so glad. Well, I hope it you know, enlightened you guys a little bit about all the possibilities and, you know, the good things and the bad things about working in something like the film industry. And I'm happy to answer questions. I don't know if you guys are on Twitter or things like that. You can always send me a question and let me know that you were in this group, and I'm happy to answer it, and maybe we'll get a chance to do this again sometime.
Absolutely. Okay, well, everyone say thank you.
Thanks, Keegan.
You're welcome.
Thanks a lot.
Meet you guys. I'll see you through a screen sometime soon, I hope.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Have a wonderful
Stay well,
day.
stay safe and healthy, you guys.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.